My name is Kooyman, and I work at the Christian Reformed Church Office of Social Justice. One of the things that we do is education about immigration for churches. One thing that's really important to understand, no matter which moment we're responding to, is how people immigrate to the United States legally. A good understanding of this can help ground our discernment about what's ethical and unethical, what's fair and what's not fair, and how we might as Christians respond in speaking to those who are making laws. So let's do a brief overview of how you can immigrate to the United States legally to better understand the broad picture of immigration. At this moment, the way that the laws are set up, there are 4 legal pathways to immigration, or 4 doors if you want. The first door is family. If you are a U.S. citizen or a legal permanent resident, you may be able to petition to bring a family member from somewhere else to immigrate to the United States. And the important thing to remember about our family-based immigration system is that you have to have a family member with the right immigration status. Your family member who's petitioning for you has to have U.S. citizenship or legal permanent residency. That's a green card. And your family member has to have the right relationship to you. It can't just be any family relationship. It has to be immediate family. And the way that our immigration system defines immediate family is a parent, a child, a sibling, or a spouse. That's it. So you cannot petition to bring a grandparent, a grandchild, a cousin, an aunt, an uncle. That's not considered to be immediate family. The second way that you can immigrate is through employment. The important thing to understand about the employment-based immigration system today is that it has changed from the time when my family members long ago immigrated to the United States, for example. I had great-great-grandparents who came to the U.S. willing to work, and once they got here, they got a job. But that's not how it works anymore. Today, you have to already have a job before you come to the United States legally. And the visa is in the hands of the employer. Now, we give different amounts of visas to different kinds of employment in this country, and it's important to know that there aren't enough visas for the demand that there is for people to come from other parts of the world to work in many sectors of the economy. So we see people in tech fields, for example, lobbying Capitol Hill for more employment visas because they don't feel like there are enough visas given by Congress to meet the demand for immigrant employers. The other important thing to know is that you cannot immigrate permanently to this country if you are working in a low-skilled field like agriculture. So this leads to a lot of systemic problems. People come for short periods of time to come and work on our farms, but the U.S. Congress does not allow for enough visas for those workers to meet the demand that there actually is for employment. So the United States Chamber of Commerce tells us that it estimates 70% of U.S. immigrant farm workers are undocumented. And that's not because they don't want to get legal. That's because there aren't enough visas to meet the need that we know that we have on farms in this country. So we see farmers on Capitol Hill who are advocating and lobbying so that they can get more visas for farm workers. So we have an employment-based immigration system that is restrictive and that needs more visas in order to function properly. Family-based, employment-based, and then refuge and asylum. These are for immigrants who are fleeing persecution in their home countries. Now, I used to think that a refugee was simply a desperate immigrant, somebody who wasn't safe to stay in their home country for any reason. But it turns out that to be a refugee or an asylum seeker, you have to meet a very strict set of criteria. You only can walk through this door if you are fleeing a credible fear of persecution based on specific factors: race, religion, national origin, political opinion, or membership in a specific social group. So that means that if you are fleeing a natural disaster, or if you are fleeing a famine, You're not being persecuted based on those 5 factors, and so you would not be considered a refugee by this definition. It is 1% of the world's refugees that are ever resettled into a new country, anywhere in the world. And since the number of refugees and displaced people is going up all the time, and we're seeing politically the number of people who are given safe harbor in a new country go down, we are seeing an exacerbated crisis in the world today because of refuge and asylum laws that are changing. The difference between a refugee and an asylum seeker is also important. A refugee is somebody who gets their paperwork, their visa, their permission to come, because they've already been screened somewhere else besides the United States. And the United States has the most robust screening process of any country of the world for admission of refugees. It takes an average of 2 years. There's 5 federal agencies involved. And we know that it is a process that works in order to make sure that the people who come are who they say they are, and that they really are victims of persecution. An asylum seeker is a different person. They might have exactly the same story as a refugee. The definition of their plight is the same 5 factors, same persecution. But they get to a border, and then they ask for asylum. So they need to go through the process of being screened once they get to the United States. That's where it's important to have a good screening process that is humane, but that's also robust right here in the United States. So when you hear about asylum seekers, that's what you're hearing about. People claiming that they are being persecuted after they already get to the United States. The last way you can come to the United States is through something called the diversity lottery. And this is, it's restricted only to immigrants who come from countries where we don't already have a lot of immigration. So there's a whole series of countries that are not allowed to apply for this lottery because we already have a lot of immigrants who come from those countries. Countries like Mexico, the Philippines, Canada, China are not allowed to apply for the diversity lottery. It's a limited number of visas, and basically if you want to get one, you have to meet certain criteria in order to put your name in the hat to get it picked out for the lottery. So those criteria are important to understand. You have to have a high school education or the equivalent of one, 2 years of work experience in a specialized field that requires you to have experience. You have to have access to technology so that you can apply. And you have to have the money to be able to apply for this. Once you've done all of those things, if all those things apply to you, then you can apply for the diversity lottery and hope that you get lucky enough that your name is picked out of the hat and you get a visa to be able to immigrate to the United States. These are our 4 ways to come to the United States. And understanding that these 4 ways are the only ways that you can come can help us to understand better why it is that we have so many undocumented people in our country today who don't fit into any of these different categories. And also it can help us to understand when Congress talks about immigration reform, which pieces of reform is it talking about? Oftentimes we hear restrictions to family immigration or increases to employment immigration are solutions that are being put forward. And as Christians, it's important that we pay attention to those things and think about the implications from the perspective of our faith on what that would do, especially to immigrants who are most vulnerable, immigrants who are most poor, who have the hardest time navigating this system, which is simply not set up for them. Hope this has been helpful as an overview very quickly for how you can immigrate to the United States legally at this moment.